Hello and welcome. I am Scarberlog, and this is City of Heroes. We are with our Sentinel Dr. Cyclone, who has about 75,000 XP to go to get to level 28, which is about 60% of a level. We're doing the Scroll of Tieleku, and we are going to be doing something different this session. I would like to do, let's call it a Q&A. I've had several questions posted by Quantum Striker and a comment by RB, and I'd like to try to take them all and do them all at once. What I actually did was shot a couple of videos where I ranted about one thing and ranted about the other thing, and they were super long, and I went into way too much detail. So let me try to be a little briefer and answer the questions as best I can. So I'm going to start with some of the easier ones, and we'll get to what's the story with the good and the bad, Rob, because I guess I told the story a long time ago, and so Quantum Striker wanted to know, and then also a comment that RB made about when I was talking about level 1 versus higher levels, and whether it was sort of a question about power gaming and making the character super powerful and that kind of stuff. So I want to get to that too. Before I get to any of that, however, I do want to say today is May 1st. And I just want to take a moment, since I'm a huge fan of Savage Worlds and Pinnacle games, as you guys know, and I've been playing Deadlands with my group for a couple of years now, that the Jody Black, who is the wife of Clint Black, they're kind of the mom and pop of the mom and pop operation of Pinnacle Games, apparently passed away yesterday or today, and they just posted a little announcement on their YouTube channel a few hours ago. So I just want to kind of, in a moment of silence, and rest in peace, Jody Black. I just wanted to acknowledge that. She'll be missed. She, by all accounts, was a really nice lady, and I'm sure Clint's going through a rough time right now. And now we're going to get back to the game, and I'll answer some of your questions. So let's take some of the easier ones Quantum Striker asked me before we get to the good and bad, Rob. One question was, what am I reading right now? I'm currently reading the second book of the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. The first book is Assassin's Apprentice. The second book is called Royal Assassin. I'm on that one. I'm about 2/3 of the way through it right now. I've gotten kind of stuck in that book, not because of the book, but because I'm just at that point in the semester where I'm so swamped with everything that, like, when I get home or when I wake up in the morning, I'm just not in a mental state where I can sit down and really devour a book and enjoy it. And I don't want to read it distracted because I'm enjoying it so much. So I'm just leaving it. Classes ended today. I have to give finals next week, and then I'm kind of done. And so after May 14th or so, I'll be able to really sink my teeth into reading. And one of the things I want to do this summer is really just sit down each morning after breakfast in my little front room where the sun comes in, and it's quite cozy and enjoyable. And there's one of the cold will airs already. And I'm just gonna just do a bunch of reading because it's fun. And I like to read. So I will be getting back to that. After reading Royal Assassin, I'm going to read the third book, which the name escapes me. I also want to read the Books of the South, which is the second trilogy in the Black Company series. I read the originals back in high school and loved them. I hadn't read them or thought about them. I'd forgotten all about them until recently. And I was in the Barnes & Noble by me trying to look for some fantasy books, and that one happened to be there, and I thought, oh gee, I haven't read that in a long time and it's really good, let me buy that. And so I purchased it and reread it. I was wondering, am I going to like it as much as I did in high school? Because a lot of times you read a book in high school, you love it, then you read a book when you're older and you're like, it's not as good as I remember. But it was very, very good. And so I got the trilogy for the Books of the South. And so my next sort of 4 books are going to be the Books of the South and the third book of the Farseer trilogy. If I enjoy all 3 of the Farseer books, and so far I've liked the first 2, so there's no reason for me to think I won't, I may get further into the realm of the Elderlings, but before that I'm planning to get back into reading some Stephen King, because I haven't read Stephen King for a bit, since around the first of the year, because I've been reading other stuff. And the other one of the other things I've been reading, I was asked about Red Rising. I've heard of it, but I have not read it. Um, and also about The Will of the Many. I have read that one. That one was also in the bookstore, and I'd heard of it, and it had a very evocative cover with that transvect flying over the Romanesque city, and there's all this Roman sort of culture and philosophy and everything. I'm a huge fan of Rome. I mean, that's one of my sweet spots. So I was all over that book. I liked it. I thought it was really cool. Um, I enjoyed um, Viz Telemus and just the whole thing. It was really very interesting world building. I went ahead and bought the Strength of the Few in hardcover because The Will of the Many was a trade paperback, and I read that in almost I don't know, it was immediately after. I think I read one other thing after reading The Will of the Many because I was waiting for Strength of the Few to arrive. I can't remember now, but then I went on and read The Strength of the Few. I did not like that one anywhere near as much as I liked The Will of the Many, and there were some things in it that I disliked enough that I'm not entirely sure I'm going to continue with the third book. Um, I don't want to get any details because it's a new novel and potential major spoilers to explain what I didn't like about it. Suffice it to say that without doing too much spoilers, the book the the world building expanded from one setting to three, and I just didn't enjoy two of the three settings at the beginning, and one of them grew on me, and the other one never did. And it just got to the point. He has a little symbol, a little icon at the beginning of each chapter that kind of lets you know which setting you're going to be in, which point of view you're going to be in. And the reality is that each time I switched out of the one I liked to one of the ones I didn't, when I saw that on the page, I would close the book and put it down. It didn't encourage me to keep reading. And so, yeah, if we're going to stay in those settings, and it appears we are, then I'm not sure I want to keep reading it. But I did love the first one. I liked it a lot. Um, so I don't know. We'll see. I sort of like loved the first one, kind of a dud on the second one, in my opinion. Do I get the third one? Maybe I wait and see what the reviews are saying when it comes out. I don't know. But in any case, so those are the books I've been reading. That was one of the questions asked, and the same in the same comment, I guess, in that video, or maybe I've certainly talked about it in a bunch of them. I've been talking about war games and about doing board war games, and now how I've gotten interested in maybe trying some miniatures war games. And just today, the starter box for the Battle of Dunkirk between the Brits and the Germans, just came for Flames of War. Man, I'll tell you, those guys. I ordered Tuesday night, got it Friday morning. It's pretty good work. Everything was there. Everything I ordered exactly as ordered. The stuff seems to be pretty high quality. Um, the books are great. I'm a little bit confused about how they do formations and stuff, um, but I'll probably figure that out. And otherwise, it all seems fairly simple, actually. And so somebody was saying, wow, they have this 125 or something page rule book. Well, like 30 or 40 pages are just um, here's the history of the war. Other pages are just describing briefly the different forces that are available: U.S., German, Russian, etc. Only about maybe 50 of the pages are rules, which may sound like a lot, but in a war game, it's actually not that much. I feel like somebody's missing here, but maybe not. I thought there was a guy that went around. I thought there was a guy that went around this little column here, but maybe not. So I've got the Flames of War, which is a World War II war game. The same company also makes World War III. The stuff looks cool, but I'm much more interested in World War II. And so that reason I bring this up is to answer the question that was asked, which is, have I looked into War Machine or Warhammer 40K? The answer is no. I don't really have a lot of interest in the settings and lore of those games. I've never heard of War Machine, but I looked it up. It seems to be a steampunk-based thing, not a. I mean, steampunk's fine. I don't want to do a war game of steampunk and buy a bunch of steampunk miniatures and paint them. I'm not that interested in that theme. Warhammer 40k seems to be this more gonzo type theme where it's science fiction fantasy type, but also there's all kinds of stuff in it as far as I understand, all kinds of different factions like, you know, giant wolves and monsters and whatever. And um, I just don't really have a lot of interest in that. My interest in wargaming is more pseudo historical. I'm fully recognizing that the World War II war games are not reproductions of history in any sense of the word. Um, I still like the historical elements of it, and that the units are historically real world recognizable. And so I do prefer historical war games when it comes to wargaming rather than fantastical. Like there are, if I was going to get fantastical, there's a whole apparently pretty good Lord of the Rings war game out there that's you can do Battle of Helm's Deep and all this other cool stuff. And yeah, if I were going to do fantasy, I might do something like that with miniatures battles, but I'm not particularly interested in that. The other thing that you have to think about and is scale. I was actually watching a video by, I guess, somebody who does a lot of miniatures wargaming, and he was talking about skirmish games versus army games. Skirmish games are where you're just using a handful of units, 5, 10. God, I haven't killed this guy fast enough, and he keeps summoning more troops. I guess it's good XP. But it's just taking me forever to kill him because he's a red lieutenant. Die already. Yeah, so army games are where you're fielding platoons and companies and that sort of thing. So many, many, many troops on the battlefield, many miniatures to paint, etc. Skirmish games are not role-playing games, but they're similar to them in the sense that you generally only have a small number of units. Click already. Why is this thing... Some of these things are not activating when I click on them. I don't know if I got lag or what. Jeez. What did I have to fight? Like 4 summons of these? That's because I didn't target him and just relentlessly take him out. I'm used to doing damage so much faster with my scrappers and stalkers that it's not an issue. And this guy's just not doing that kind of damage yet. Okay. So anyway, I prefer the historical stuff. And the reason I like World War II is that it was essentially the beginning of real combined arms warfare. I'm not as interested in the skirmish game because that's more like you're just using individual units and you can like even name them John and Mary and Bob, you know what I mean? And they can persist through a campaign, and that's cool and all, but that's kind of like a role-playing game, and I would play a role-playing game if I wanted to play a role-playing game. And I would much rather play an army-based game. Now, I don't want to do, giant columns of divisions on the table. You can do that with like 6mm miniatures, but I don't want to do that. I want to have like squads. I want to do the equivalent of Advanced Squad Leader, but with miniatures, because I think that sounds cool. And so I've got the models for Flames of War, and I'm going to be doing that. And I might try Bolt Action, which is a little bit bigger of a scale and is sort of not skirmish, but it's not as big of a war scale, an army scale, as Flames of War. I purposely picked Flames of War because the miniatures are smaller and they'll fit in the tabletop better, but also because you're fielding more units and it feels like a bigger battle. Why am I not able to hit this guy? What is wrong with this? Was he really that far out of range? He was right there. Oh, God, his stupid hurricane. So anyway, I like the historical war games. I prefer World War II because it's the beginning of combined arms, which is where you're using mechs and armor, and not mechs, but like mechanized infantry and armor and mortars and artillery and all of that kind of stuff together, rather than just having, say, infantry and cavalry, just ground troops. Because before World War II, that's all you kind of could have, right? The airplanes were not of the sort that you had in World War II. The biplanes could do some kind of air support, but not the kind of air support you get in World War II with bombers and stuff. And the artillery wasn't as good. Cannons were nowhere near as good as field artillery, and you didn't have real tanks. Like, they were beginning to make them in World War One, but the tanks of the sort that we think of when we think of combined arms, or at least I do, are World War II tanks or newer. And so it's the beginning of combined arms, but the beginning of it, which means infantry is still important and powerful as compared with this guy, as compared with modern day, where infantry is not a really important part, right? Like, the air power is so much more important, and tanks are so much more important as you get through the eras. And so I feel like World War II is a sweet spot, which is why I picked that as my wargaming period of choice, both for the board games, doing things like Advanced Squad Leader and such, and for the miniatures. So I haven't looked into, or I don't really have any interest in Warhammer or War Machine, to answer that question. Now, good Rob versus bad Rob. Quantum asked, what's the story with the good Rob versus the bad Rob? So let's get into that. So when I was in junior high school, which for me was 7th to 8th grade, that's what they called it, there was a guy named Rob, the first Rob, who turned out to be the bad Rob. There was a guy named Rob who was a year younger than my best friend and I, and he started playing. I don't remember how we met him. Maybe he was in the cafeteria, gym period. I don't remember. But he was interested in role-playing games, and we played Champions with him. I believe we must have also played Dungeons and Dragons with him, because I can't imagine that when we switched to D&D every few months, we just stopped playing games with him. He must have played D&D with us, but I have no specific memory of him playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that's because the way the game was, his brand of ridiculous, I don't even want to call it power gaming, just hyper gaming, where he's trying to make his character the most powerful character in the world, but he was bad at it, so he wasn't that great at the math. So he had abusive characters that violated the points limitations we had put in our combined campaign as like our large group that went to my high school of all the people who played Champions, which are mostly centered on my best friend and myself. I don't think there was anybody who played Champions without the two of us. But we played with various different groups, and we just had this sort of collective rule of what's your maximum number of points you can put into a power, and so on and so forth. And this Rob violated all of that. He didn't start out super bad, but he had a number of problem player issues. His first problem was that he had main character syndrome. He wanted his character to be the linchpin character of every scenario that we ever played. And he didn't want his character to take damage. He wanted his character to hit every time. He never wanted to fail at anything, and he never wanted anyone to succeed against him at anything. And then, since things are done with die rolls, as you can imagine, that's not possible. But that's kind of the way he acted. Like, he really acted like he wanted to win Champions. And he would try all kinds of ridiculous, crazy stuff that really isn't covered in the rules just to try and get advantage over somebody. And if you said no to him, he would fight with you and argue with you about it, because he would say you were picking on him and stuff like that. This guy gave himself, like, one of his characters said 3 dependent NPCs, but if you brought any of them into the game, he would say you were picking on him for rolling up his NPC. Right? So it's like, well, you're not allowed to have a power and a disadvantage that isn't worth any a disadvantage that doesn't disadvantage you isn't worth any points. So if you have a dependent NPC who never shows up, then it's not worth points. But again, because we didn't have a single GM to lay down the rules, we couldn't really hold him to that, and he could kind of do whatever he wanted, right? And so he was quite the prima donna. He would complain anytime anything negative happened to his characters. He would blame you for it. He would say you were picking on him, and he would kind of throw a temper tantrum, which was extremely trying. He also cheated. He did not accurately record his stun or his endurance, so his character would stay conscious longer than he was supposed to. He would be able to use more powers than he was supposed to. We did not realize he was doing this at first. Remember, we were all fairly new to Champions, and it wasn't like we were going to be able, off of the top of our heads, to keep track of other people's characters. And he took advantage of that fact. In ninth grade, another guy named Rob, the one I call the good Rob, was in my homeroom. And I think I'd met him in junior high, but we knew each other from homeroom. Because we saw each other every day in homeroom. And he wasn't alphabetically near me, but because of the way the rows were, he sat next to me. And I'm going to learn my lesson and focus on this Death Shaman. And just take him out and not worry about the others, because he's going to be the dangerous one. I don't want him summoning a whole bunch of more guys to fight. He and I talked a lot, and he found out about Champions, and we started playing Champions when my best friend and I were in 8th grade, and the Bad Rob was in 7th grade, and we had played it for about a year, and it's now 9th grade, and I was telling the good Rob about Champions, and he wanted to learn it. And so we had a study period together at like 4th period or something, and we had a very liberal, if you want to call it that, at the right word, or flexible, or I don't know what you want to call it. We had a study hall teacher that many study hall teachers said, you're going to be quiet and read, you're not going to talk to each other. This guy, as long as we were pretty quiet about it, allowed, I don't remember who it was, actually, who was the study period teacher. I get the feeling it was a male teacher, but I can't remember who it was. Allowed us to play Champions. Like, as long as we were being quiet and we weren't bothering the other kids, he let us talk quietly, and he let the other kids talk quietly too. So we played Champions during study period, and we had a lot of fun. And he made up a character who he understood D&D and not Champions, and he didn't read superhero comics. So he made up a character, two characters. I can't remember the second one, but the first one was called Monk, as in D&D monk, right? He wanted to be that was his favorite character class. He liked monks, and so what I said was, "Well, make a martial artist, right?" These guys, I love these guys. How you doing, buddy? Yeah, these are my favorite enemies. I think these look so freaking cool. The Totem of Mteru. I still think the one called That Which Seeks is the coolest being and one of the coolest names in the game. That Which Seeks. Love it. Anyway, he made up this guy that was a martial artist and had throwing knives, and he called him Monk. And then sometime later, I want to say a few months, we got this idea, my best friend and I, to make a bigger group of champions. We'd been playing with 2 people here, 3 people there. Let's all get together. So we had the 2 Robs, me, my best friend, a guy named Tim who was from Russia, who only played with us the first scenario, and then he was so bizarrely weird. He didn't cheat or anything, but he was just weird that we stopped playing with him. And then another guy named Alvin. Alvin made up a mentalist character named Cyanna. Alvin only played her a handful of times. Mostly we played her because Alvin never showed up. Tim made up a character named Magneta Storm. Half Magneto, half Storm. Female character with both Storm and magnetic powers. Don't ask. My best friend made up a character named Astron, who was like a space guy, like an alien with green skin and had cosmic ray powers. Monk was renamed to Assaulter and was a martial artist with now a throwing star instead of throwing knives. A big, giant, frisbee-sized throwing star attached to his chest that he would take off and hurl. Because a friend of ours named Larry, who never played Champions with us but was a good artist, drew a picture of Assaulter for Rob, and Rob liked the picture, so he changed the character from having a couple of throwing knives to having one throwing star that had an endurance battery in it that would allow it to come back to him. So it was like a boomerang almost. I made up a character named Equinox, half fire, half ice, and the Bad Rob made up a character named Nucleon, who was a mutant. All of Bad Rob's characters were mutants because he loved X-Men, and he had no creativity at all when it came to origins, so I Was Born with My Powers was totally his go-to with literally every character I can remember of his. And Nucleon had nuclear powers and was kind of based on the character Firestorm. And so that was the first group. They were called the Crusaders, and we went on our first scenario. And the thing about Nucleon was he had an elemental control. And the way elemental controls work is that you would buy whatever the most expensive power was, and then you would get a discount on any other powers in the elemental control, half of the value of the base power. And you had to have at least that many powers, that many points in the power. I guess it wasn't the most expensive, it was just the base power. So he had a 60-point elemental control, 60-point energy blast, and then for 30 points he had 3 or 4 more powers. No normal defense, attack, flight, and force field. All of them worth 60 but only cost him 30. So he was trying to power game, right? So that alone was about 150 points out of the like 275 we started with. And the problem with that is he sucked endurance, because back then in Champions, 60-point power would cost you 12 endurance to run. And he had reduced endurance costs on, I think, his force field or maybe his energy blast, but not on all the other powers. And they just ate endurance. At the end of the first adventure, it was a battle in a nuclear power plant, and he went in and tried to stop the meltdown. And as part of the experience, my best friend, in addition to giving us way too much experience for Champions, you're supposed to get 3 or 4, he gave us like 50. Because we were used to D&D where you get thousands of XP. He also gave the Bad Rob a free power on top of that, a free slot in his elemental control to put what he wants in there, and Rob took desolidification, which is illegal. I don't know how he did it, because desolidification is a 40-point power, and you can't put that into a 60-point elemental control, but I don't know if they let him have it, right? For free. He didn't have to, it wasn't like you can spend some of the points on the desolidification. My best friend just gave it to him for free, because he acted the hero and went in and stopped the meltdown. I then ran a scenario, and oh, by the way, Rob also had way too much defense. He had plus 25, plus 35 force field, which gave him, he had 7 PDED, physical energy defense. So you add up, he had 32 physical and energy and 42 energy defense when he had his force field on. To put it in perspective, nobody had over like 28 or 25 besides him. Like, I think my character had 24. And Astron had no more than 30 with his force field on. And Cyanna and Assaulter were below 20. So this guy had like 12, 15 more points of defense, energy defense, than anybody else had. So he was over the top ridiculous. But he sucked endurance. Thing is, the good Rob noticed, and the good Rob was really good at math, unlike the bad Rob, that the bad Rob, Nucleon, never ran out of endurance. He got suspicious. So now I did my scenario, and I had a huge battle, a huge argument with the bad Rob, just to show you how he did things. Right? Again, remember, he has desolidification as a power. He has a force field as a power. They cost him a lot of endurance to run. He generally isn't going to run them both at once, because if you're desolid, you can't be hit by anything other than special attacks that affect desolid objects. Now, knowing he had this, I gave Overlord, the leader of the Overlords and my big bad evil guy, an FX desolid attack. But because it affects desolids, he had a 20 die 6 normal attack, which is obscene, by the way, but that's what I needed to do to affect the Crusaders. And he had about a 14 die 6, 13 and a half or something die 6 affects desolid attack, because you had to spend points to be able to affect desolid objects, because it's an advantage, right? So for the same 100 points that you get 20 die 6 normal attack from, it costs more to get affects desolid in, so you couldn't get as many points. But knowing that Nucleon usually turned his force field off during desolidification periods, I wasn't too worried about that. The other thing about Overlord is he had a 12 speed, which is max. He goes 12 times in 12 segments. No one had ever created a 12 speed character, ever. The highest we'd ever had up to that point, I think, was 9. When you have a 12 speed, you go on every segment. Nobody else goes on segment 1. And in those days, in 2nd edition Champions, and I still run Champions this way, the combat started on segment 1. And so the typical thing for GMs to do once combat began was to count down the segments. Segment 1, nobody goes. Segment 2, nobody goes. Segment 3, who's got the best decks? Oh, and there's a boss. Okay. We're going to go all in here. We're just going to catch the other guy in the AoEs, I think, if possible. So, when I said segment 1, Overlord goes instead of nobody goes, there was an audible gasp. Everybody freaked. And understandably, because we'd never had a 12-speed villain. And what had happened is right before the combat, they had some conversation, monologuing and stuff with Overlord. And the Bad Rob had a habit of bloviating and threatening villains and claiming to be way more powerful than they were and bragging. Right? And so, because he had done all of this sort of braggadocio before the battle started, I said, segment 1, Overlord goes. Everybody gasped, and then I said, he turns to Nucleon and says, let's see how powerful you really are. And Bad Rob immediately said, oh, by the way, I'm D-Solid. I said, what? You didn't say that. Oh, no, I'm D-Solid. Yeah, I start the I'm D-Solid before the battle starts. I said, okay. That's fine. Overlord sees that you're fated and says, you may think that going intangible will help you, but I can still affect you. And he tweaks a little dial on his glove and aims at you on segment 1. And he said, wait, no. I have my force field up. I'm not D-Solid. I said, okay. Then what I said before goes. He says that and he's going to attack you. Wait, no. I'm D-Solid. I kid you not, guys. This went on. When I said he's going to attack you with his normal attack, he said, no, wait, I'm D-Solid. When I said he's going to attack you with your effects D-Solid attack, he said, no, wait, I'm solid, and I have my force field up. And he kept changing his mind. And I said, fine, he's going to attack you this way. No, wait. I said, make up your mind. Are you D-Solid or not? I'm D-Solid. Okay, he's going to attack you with this. No, wait. Right? He just kept doing it. So I finally got, and I shouldn't have done this, I should have just said, he went again on segment 2 before anybody. I should have said on segment 1 he hit you with effects D-Solid, on segment 2 he hit you with the regular one, whichever one is going to work. Right? One of them is going to work. And so, anyway, I finally got fed up with him and I took his character sheet away. And I said to the rest of the group, Nucleon vanishes. And he turns to Astron or Cyana instead. And so then there was a big blow up, and of course Bad Rob freaked out because I did, what are you picking on me? And in the end, I think we brought his character back, and I said, okay, on segment 2, are you going to behave yourself? Yeah, okay, you reappear, go ahead and go, right? And turn on your force field, do whatever you're going to do. So the battle ends. Overlord flees. They defeat him, but they don't capture him. And then the good Rob decides he's going to be he's willing to GM next. And so he was new. He'd never GM'd, whereas the rest of us had. And he said, I want to get backup sheets for your characters because I would like to... I don't know what I'm doing exactly as a GM, and I want to pre-test the battles and make sure that they're not too hard or too easy. Now, what really was going on, and good Rob explained this to me, is that he was fed up with the fact that these guys were often late. 2 of them, the Bad Rob and my best friend. We're always waiting for one of them. Sometimes they were both late, but usually one of them was late. And we're sitting there waiting because nobody had copies of their characters. He said, I want backup copies. But he knew if he asked them for backup copies so that we could play without them, they would refuse. Right? Because they didn't want us to play without them. Right? And the whole reason we felt that they were willing to be this late and not worry about it is because they figured that we couldn't play without them. I'm sick of missing this guy. There we go. And so he got the backup characters. It didn't do any good. They still were late. But at least we could play when they weren't there. So the other thing is, he had, like I said, he was better at math than the Bad Rob, and he was starting to get the sense that this guy was not tracking his endurance properly. So the good Rob started running his game, and because of the pre-tested battles, he introduced so many innovations into our gaming battle pre-test, pre-roll sheets where he would roll the damage and the stun and body damage ahead of time for like dozens of attacks of different power levels, and then just it's a 12 die 6 attack, just pick off the next one off the list so he didn't have to stop and roll and add numbers. By the way, my best friend hated this and thought we should always roll at the table. But once I saw how effective and how good it was at saving time, I started doing it as well. In fact, he used to roll them by hand. I actually put it on my computer, made a computer algorithm, and printed out many, many sheets of it. I made sure that the average was correct, so that I knew that we weren't having a bad run of the pseudo random number generator. Although I don't know if I knew exactly what it was back then, I did know that computers sometimes were a little funky about generating die rolls. So anyway, by testing the battles, the good Rob could make them really tough and really hard. And we won, but it was hard to win. And it was a bit, shall we say, desperate for us. And as a consequence, it was challenging. And the bad Rob had to use a lot of Nucleon's powers, which, remember, costs a lot of endurance. And so, in the middle of one of the battles, fairly early on, the bad Rob was playing his character. And, oh man, we're going to have trouble with this guy, I think. But we'll do the best we can. Bad Rob's playing his character, and he's doing a bunch of crap and using up a bunch of endurance. And after 3 or 4 phases, the good Rob says, as the GM now, to the bad Rob, after he got all done, he said, you take 17 stun, or something like 11 stun. And the reason he said that is because in Champions, if you get to 0 endurance and you keep using your powers, you start taking stun damage as endurance, and it's something like 1 die 6 of stun for every 2 endurance you use, or something like that. And so he had used a 3 endurance, or 6 endurance beyond the 0, right? He was at 0 and then used 6 more endurance, and so yeah, that made him take 3d6 of stun. Can't believe I'm immobilized through my hold defense. Anyway, and that 3d6 of stun was from the overuse of endurance. So he said, you take 11 stun. And bad Rob said, from what? And good Rob GM said, you're out of endurance. And in fact, you used 6 endurance more than you have, so you take 3d6 as stun as endurance. And bad Rob said, no, I didn't. I still have like 8 endurance left. And good Rob said, no, you don't. I've been tracking it. Like, no, you don't. You have, And he said, well, how would you know? And good Rob said, I've been tracking it. I have your backup character sheet. And he read off. He said, you flew. That's 15 inches. That's 3 endurance. You had your force field on. That's 12 endurance or whatever. You shot your energy blast. That's 6. You shot your NND. That's 12. And he went through the list. And the bad Rob, instead of being ashamed and saying, or just saying, oh, I made a mistake, he said, how dare you? How dare you keep track of my character's endurance? This is my character. I keep the endurance record on my character. And the good Rob said, not if you're not doing it correctly. You're not taking off the right endurance. And so, like, I was livid. I knew the guy was cheating, right? This wasn't an accident. Based on his behaviors and what he did with his characters and all the crap he used to pull with his characters and how he used to do all kinds of cheesy stuff with his characters to try and get more power out of them, I was like, no, this guy's doing it on purpose. He is cheating because he doesn't want his character to stop being able to attack because he's out of endurance, right? And so there was a big blow up, and the 2 Robs never got along after that because good Rob was like, this guy's a cheater, and he didn't even want to play with him, I think. And bad Rob was like, this guy caught me cheating. I don't like that, right? I mean, he wouldn't have said it that way, I'm sure. He was, he basically blamed the good Rob for catching him. This is very common in cheaters. I see this all the time at my university when students cheat. When they cheat and get caught red-handed, obviously cheating, the students who got caught cheating and who know they cheated will basically blame the teachers for catching them. Like, you're the bad guy for catching them cheating. They're not the bad guy for cheating. And Bad Rob was just like this. And so we did continue to play with him for probably another year. Eventually, he went to another high school compared to us. And he lived in the same town, but his house was farther from everybody else's, and it was up a really steep hill, so we hated walking there. So unless our parents were going to drive us, we really didn't want to go to his house. He came to us a lot. His mother would drive him, so he didn't have to climb the hill to go back home. But it was unpleasant playing champions with him. Now, again, I don't remember any D&D stuff with him, so maybe he was okay to play D&D with. I really don't remember. I think we did play D&D together. I do remember he bought me a D&D module, and I don't remember which one, for Christmas. And the reality is that when you weren't playing champions with him, he was a really nice guy and fun to hang out with. Like I said, he was a nice enough guy, and I enjoyed being around him enough that, I mean, like, we exchanged Christmas gifts, right? You don't do that with people you don't like. I didn't dislike him as a person, but as I've said before, get him behind the wheel of a champions character, you're in for just horror. Whereas the good Rob was an amazing player, a great GM. Many of the techniques I use for GMing, I actually swiped wholesale from the good Rob because he's just good. He does a really good job. Bad Rob was a horrible GM. His games, his adventures were always about his own characters who he played as NPCs. That was normal. We used to do that. But when I played my character as an NPC, I just used him in combat to help the players even the odds, right? And I tried to do a good job in combat, but I almost never had him say anything, and the adventure was never anything important about him, right? What the Bad Rob would do is he would make an adventure about his character's origin, where his character is the linchpin to the scenario, and then he would run it for us, like we cared. And often it was like literally we could not do anything to the villains, but they could do, but the Bad Rob's PCs could. He would run them as NPCs, and they would win all the battles. And we were basically just there to watch his characters be cool. He had main character syndrome. He was a Wang Rod. I mean, like, there's just no two ways about it. Good Rob was awesome. I was friends with him for many, many years, and I haven't really been in touch with him the last couple years, but I mean, like, we've been friends for decades. He's a great guy. Bad Rob, I haven't seen since 10th grade. Which would have been like 86, 85, 86, something like that. It's been about 40 years. So that's the story of the good and the Bad Rob. Now, the last little bit that I wanted to talk about, let me just check this. This statement here. Yeah. RB says about players with the I win button. He reminded me of the anecdote that I told about playing Liberty Lass and getting frustrated because one of the other players was a controller and was mezzing everything, and so I couldn't really tank. And when I told him, look, I don't want to play anymore because I can't really do anything with you using your phantoms to draw aggro and flashing everybody in the room, with flashing being not being flasher but flash paralyze. It's just not interesting. And he said, well, I don't have to do it. And I said, yeah, but like, it doesn't feel that great for me as a player to know that my character is only useful because your character is holding back, right? And so RB made the point that that's why players maybe don't want to hold back, and but then made a really excellent comment that I absolutely love, and it was, I want to read it to get it right. It's a sick function of optimization in general. It can be fun to engage in the mental exercise and puzzle-like element of optimizing and finding the optimal solution, that is to the character creation. But you're only barreling toward a result where you have solved the game, and once you've solved the game, you're kind of done with it. And I think that is absolutely true. So I just wanted to comment on that. And I do want to point out, though, when it comes to the idea of using powers that are OP, right? Um, you don't ever have to use them. And it is possible, if as a player you want to occasionally have access to them, but not use them all the time, for you to make up an in-character reason why your character wouldn't use them all the time. I watched a Coffin Rock Let's Play when I was getting ready to run Deadlands to just see how they ran Coffin Rock. Because there was a couple of things in there that confused me on how you would run them, and I wanted to see how that GM ran them, and then he didn't do that anyway. But it was really interesting to watch, and in that playthrough, the Huckster was afraid of his own powers. That's how he role-played it. Because he knew he was getting his powers from a demon, and he was afraid that if he kept using his powers, he would end up in hell. And so he was super reluctant to use his powers, and the other players had to kind of talk him into doing it. And as a consequence, he rarely used them. Well, it's not hard to just do something like that and make up a character who, in character, just wouldn't want to use his own powers very much. And then you have it when you need it, but you have a reason why you wouldn't always use it. So I suggest that if you, as a player, want to have a powerful pseudo I win button, but not use it on every battle, you don't just have to hold back and carry the idiot ball and be too stupid to use your overpowered thing. You could make your character afraid to use it. Or in Champions, you could put it on one charge or two charges, and then you can only use it twice in a scenario. You use it when you absolutely have to. If I'm a GM and you have this ridiculous power, but you have it on one charge per scenario, I might allow it. Because I know you're not going to be using it all the time. You're only going to be using it in an emergency. The problem is when you're using this thing all the time to solve every problem and make everything trivial. And as a player, you shouldn't be doing that, and you should have the self-control not to do it. And if you feel that it's a little annoying to just have to, quote-unquote, not do stuff, then I suggest that you find an in-character reason why your character would be afraid or reluctant to use those powers, and just do that. Right? There's no reason why you can't come up with that. And the last bit I would say is, right, you have two choices when you have something that's OP and that you and the GM both know are OP. One choice is to control yourself. The other choice is to let the GM control it for you, which most of the time is going to take the form of the GM outright banning it, right? So let's take a look at just powers themselves. My preference would be if fewer characters have powers in my groups than not. Okay? I expressed this sentiment directly when we were playing Harn World with Savage Worlds and Fantasy Companion. I told them Harn is a low magic or a magic rare world. It's not low magic, but it's magic rare, and that most characters shouldn't have magic. Right? And the one guy wanted to play a wizard from Meldarine. Okay. The other players initially agreed not to have powers, right? Not to be wizards. One of them, the new girl, perfect. She was just the wife of a carpenter, and she had a walking stick that her husband, she was a widow. She was in her 60s, so she was like elderly. But she had fighting, which is pretty cool. And she had this stick that her husband had made her, and she used to pound stuff with it. Really cool stuff. Skill-based character. How am I missing 4 of these things? I don't hear anything. She has only skills, no powers. One of them said, I'll make up a bookbinder, and I'd like to eventually initially she said, I'd like to eventually, because this character's interested in books and reading and stuff, I'd like to eventually get some powers. Okay. Right off the bat, I thought I heard a glowy. Right off the bat, before the first advance. Beginning of the campaign, she takes the arcane background wizard. Oh, I missed down this end. Okay. Um, then the paladin. I specifically told him paladins are knights. They're not magical. He said, "Can I take the cleric edge? I want to be able to lay on hands and do magic stuff." So now we have 3 out of the 4 being magical and casting spells when I told them this is supposed to be a magic rare world where not everybody casts spells. Right? So what happened? I'll be honest, I kind of lost interest in the world. I created some challenges I thought would be interesting, and they just spellcasted their way out of it each advance. They did a couple of advances. In each advance, they took more spells, more power points, and I was finally like, I could restrict this, but they clearly want to do this, and honestly, I don't. So I just said, I think we're going to stop. I don't have time. But I was too busy to do it, and I felt like we were doing this play by post, and I felt like it wasn't working great. But yeah, I just got tired of them solving every problem with magic and familiars and all this other crap. And I just said, I'm not going to do it anymore, right? So this is the problem, right? You can restrict yourself, or the GM's going to give up or restrict you, right? Now, with the rest of Savage Worlds, we're playing Deadlands right now, and that's Gonzo. And again, 3 out of the 4 players have not only arcane backgrounds, but 2 of the 3 of them have access to every power on their list, which is almost every power in the game, with whatever edges they have, right? So it's bad enough they all have an arcane background, but 2 of them have edges that let them basically cast any power in the game. I'm fed up with it. So what's going to happen next is in the next time I run a campaign in Savage Worlds, I'm going to say no arcane backgrounds. You see what I'm saying? So you can control yourself, or if I as a GM have to come in and control it, that's going to be banning stuff, right? Think about Dungeons and Dragons. My players can't control themselves with Find Familiar, so now what I'm going to do, if I ever run, I won't ever run D&D, but if I ever ran 5th edition again, because everybody has to have a familiar and use it all the time, I'll ban it. No Find Familiar in this game. And then they can't do it, right? So you can control yourself and find an in-character way to explain it, or the GM's going to control you. And that usually means banning it. Counterspell, banned. Find Familiar, banned. Right? There are going to be probably other powers and spells and stuff that I would ban. I'm not going to ban stuff in Savage Worlds, right? But look at telekinesis. I didn't outright ban it, but I nerfed it. I hear a glowy. Must be upstairs. Yeah, this room, I always miss this one. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so there's one last thing. And maybe downstairs. Yeah, so like you can either control yourself or the GM can control it for you, which as I say is going to mean bans, nerfs, restrictions. If the GM can trust you not to do overpowered things, they don't have to restrict it. But if you're just going to keep doing the OP stuff, then you should expect bans and restrictions and house rules. There's a reason why when I ran Champions, I had like a 4-page single space typed up on dot matrix printer, the paper that you kind of rip the sides off of with the little perforations. Yeah, I had I think it was 4 pages. I think I had 4 single space type pages of house rules, most of which was this is banned, this is banned, this is banned, this isn't allowed, this is banned, this is banned, this is banned. Why did I have those? Because I started permanent GMing in college. I'd been playing Champions from 8th grade, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 5 years. I'd seen the bad Rob and all the abuses. So I just put a bunch of rules in place saying you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Because they couldn't control themselves, my friends in high school. I said, even though this is a different group of people other than one guy who was still in high school, we're banning all this crap. We're not allowing this stuff. I'm not permitting it. I was a very restrictive GM. Why? Because I saw that I couldn't trust the players to behave like grown-ups. Right? It's sort of like, again, it's sort of like with students. And you look at my syllabus, and you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Here are all these really draconian rules. Why are they like that? Because when I don't put those rules in place, the students act like children. So like this semester in my seminar class, and I didn't notice it at first, but the last couple of weeks I sit in the front, I'm looking behind me, and this seminar is like the students are giving presentations and the other students are listening and taking notes, and then we have a quiz on it the next period. Why do we have a quiz in a seminar? Because I normally wouldn't do that. Because people weren't paying attention a couple of years ago. So now, and they were coming late. So now I have to give a quiz at the beginning of every period to make sure they show up. Didn't mean to do that. That's all right. Okay. So I was sitting there and I noticed almost the entire class had phones out. They had laptops open. They had tablets open, and they were doing stuff on them. They weren't paying attention to the presentation. Right? Wasn't the whole, like half the class. So now I already made a note to myself, and I think I already went in and adjusted next semester's syllabus, that I need to ban the use of any electronic devices during student presentations. And if I see you with one, you get a 0 for the day. Right? I don't want to be that draconian, but when I'm saying to the students, put it away, and they're not, that's when the banning happens, right? That's when the ban hammer comes out. Right? When I started seminar, it was just everybody presents and just show up. Because that's what seminar is supposed to be. Right? But the students weren't grown up enough to do that, so now I have to put in all these restrictions. So my point in this is this. Be responsible with your powers. If you recognize that a power is OP, come up with an in-character reason why you wouldn't use it all the time, and be reasonable about how often you use it, and then you don't have to worry about the GM coming in and banning all your stuff. Otherwise, the GM is basically compelled, in the name of game balance, in the name of protecting the session, in the name of protecting the other players who don't have the OP stuff, so that their character isn't being overshadowed. He's going to have to ban it. So if you don't want it banned, don't do it. It's pretty simple. All right. We're finishing up here. Let's level up. Wow. Okay. We're right here, so we'll go ahead and do it. We get a new power. Not sure what that's going to be. Let's see. Power Sync. What does this do? So Power Sync is an AoE. Leeches energy directly from bodies of foes, draining their endurance. Oh! Yes, we want that. Because we are having endurance problems. So that'll help. Let's see, how am I going to do this? I'll put it up there. Yeah, I like that. That's really cool. Now, does this need accuracies? No, just endurance modification. Okay. So we're not going to worry about that right now. We may eventually put endurance modification on there. We also get health. Oh, we get regeneration. All right. And regeneration's good. If we got direct health, I would put a heal on it. We can actually do that. There we go. All right, guys. So hopefully I answered all the questions. Hopefully I wasn't too ranty. And that answers, I think, all the questions that I can think of. Let me just take a quick look. Is there something else I could quickly answer? No, it doesn't look like it. So, yep, I've answered some comments. Go ahead and check if you've left comments. One person did say, the Shadow Yowl said that they started playing a Sentinel again, which is really cool. I'm glad that that it got somebody playing their character that they loved over again. So go for it, guys. Remake those characters from live It's really fun to do. I've done it a couple of times. Liberty Last being one. I hope you've enjoyed. And until next time, feel free to leave more comments, by the way. I'll be happy to answer them. And until next time, I'm Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes.